After we finished moving into our new single-family home, another moving truck suddenly stopped in front of our house. Then, my husband said something unbelievable. "From today, my parents will be living with us too." What? My in-laws said, "If you oppose, such a daughter-in-law should get divorced." I burst out laughing when I heard this. We might as well be divorced already, right? Huh? This is the story of when I left my husband and his family right after we moved into our new home. My name is Kelly, and I am a housewife in my 30s. I married Steve 5 years ago, and our son is now 4 years old. I quit my job once I got married, but I went back to work when our son turned 4. And now I work full-time on weekdays. When I first met my husband, he was kind and laid back, a bit oblivious. But I thought that was part of his charm. Most importantly, I was attracted to the fact that he always put me first, which led me to marry him. However, I later realized that my compatibility with my in-laws was far from good. They were people who cared too much about appearances, always thinking unilaterally without considering others. The first sign of trouble was during the wedding preparations. They wanted a grand ceremony because he was the eldest son. I wanted a modest wedding with only close friends and family. But they complained it would be embarrassing and not fitting for their family status. Let me make it clear, my husband's family was not of high status. His father was a retired office worker, and his mother a housewife. They had always lived in rented houses, not a large one. Yet they seemed to want to maintain appearances. In the end, they said, "We will cover the costs," and went ahead to book a wedding venue they knew without consulting us. I didn't want to start a conflict before getting married. So I went along with my in-laws' wishes for a grand wedding reception. However, the cost burdened by the groom's side ended up being solely on my family. It was the same when I was in labor. My mother-in-law arrived at the hospital and immediately said, "What, not born yet?" I thought since the labor started, the baby would be here. I came all this way for nothing. How tedious. And then she continued to make irrelevant small talk beside my bed. Despite my pain, she didn't care and kept talking. "Hey, are you listening, Kelly?" During this time, my husband did nothing but watch, not offering any support. I used to like my husband's laid-back nature. But now it seemed more like insensitivity or even obliviousness. Assuming his parents' behavior was normal. The inconsiderate actions of my mother-in-law and father-in-law continued even after giving birth. Despite it being shortly after birth, they insisted on celebrating at our house late into the night, demanding, "Hey, prepare some snacks." Even when my son cried, nobody attempted to soothe him. Because of this, I've always felt uncomfortable around my in-laws, trying to keep our interactions to a minimum. However, a particular situation led us to become deeply involved with my in-laws. We were living in a rental apartment, but as our son grew, we started thinking about buying a new single-family home. Building a house meant we had to look for land, choose a construction company, and decide on the interior design, requiring many meetings. Since we both worked, it was difficult to schedule meetings during weekdays. So we always arranged them on weekends. However, it was hard to have long meetings with our son present. So he was often taken care of by my parents, who lived nearby. We had planned another meeting for the next day. But my mother called to say she had caught a cold and didn't want to risk passing it to my son. So she couldn't take care of him. So, I had to decide whether to cancel the meeting or take my son with me. And I consulted my husband about it. He suggested, why not leave him with my parents for once? I really didn't want to rely on my in-laws. But without considering my opinion, my husband started calling them. "Hey, it's me. Can you take care of our son for the day tomorrow? I'll bring some souvenirs," he said. I told him, that's really sudden, but my oblivious husband just replied. They said it's okay, and hung up the phone. I had a bad feeling about this. The next day, we took our son to my in-laws in the morning before heading to the meeting. When we returned, I brought some sweets that my in-laws liked, hoping to leave quickly. But, as expected, I got caught up. Building a house, are you? What kind of house is it? My father-in-law asked. A system kitchen, huh? Young people these days have it easy. My mother-in-law added, with a sting. Then, my husband said, I've left everything about the kitchen up to Kelly. My mother-in-law, looking at me, said, oh, I'd love to use a nice kitchen myself. So, I said with a smile, why don't you consider remodeling your kitchen, then? She replied, as if we have the money for that. I'd rather have you do it as a filial duty. Watching this, my husband carelessly said. Well, once our house is finished, you should come and see. You can even use it if you want. I really didn't like the idea of someone else using my kitchen. After being asked all sorts of detailed questions about the new house for 2 hours, I was finally free. On our way home, I felt anxious and checked with my husband. Hey, your parents seemed really interested in our house. We're not going to live with them, right? I asked. He replied. It's our family's home. I told you, Kelly can do whatever she likes with the kitchen. So, I believed him. From that day, my in-laws started offering to take care of our son during our meetings. While it was appreciated, they always ended up giving unsolicited advice about the house. My father-in-law would say, show me the blueprints, and ask. How big is the bath? How spacious is the guest room? He even suggested, you should install handrails at the entrance for when you get older. My mother-in-law would say, this room should be a guest room. It's more comfortable, and how high is the kitchen counter? When I told her, she'd say, oh, that's inconvenient for me. When she suggested, you should make it lower, I couldn't help but respond. I made it at a height that's convenient for me. Then, my father-in-law said, it's not just you using it. Steve will live there too, so you have to consider everyone's convenience. As if we're designing the house to accommodate occasional visitors. Looking to my husband for support, he simply accepted their words without any objection. I wondered whose house we were building. Every time we had such exchanges, I grew tired. So, I suggested to my husband, can we stop leaving our son at your parents'? And I'm troubled by their constant interference with the new house. However, he dismissed it, it's helpful that they take care of our son. Just put up with a few complaints. That's what wives do. I pressed on. But, your parents are pushing their opinions too much. It's like they're planning to live there themselves. We're not going to live together, right? My husband roughly snapped back. I told you, it's our family's home. Stop nagging, or let's just get a divorce. Divorce. What is he even saying? The intrusion about the new house started with his parents. Yet, why does it end up being about our divorce? But from that day, my husband's threats of divorce increased every time something happened. On another day, after a meeting, my in-laws came to our house and started discussing the new house again. Hey, shouldn't you change the location of the bath? My father-in-law started. My mother-in-law said, that might be better, why not ask the architectural office to change it now? And even my husband seemed ready to make the call. Finally, I said, this has already been decided. That's when my father-in-law got angry. How dare you, a mere daughter-in-law? You know nothing about houses. So you should listen to what your elders have to say, he yelled. My mother-in-law added, exactly. We're just trying to give you good advice. Far from helping me, my husband said. That's right. We should consider their advice since it's coming from a good place. My father-in-law looked at me and said, "Hey, Steve. Couldn't you find a more understanding wife?" Dad, don't say that. Look, Kelly, apologize. Otherwise, it's divorce for us. What a situation. What? I thought to myself, this is hopeless. Despite my efforts to avoid interacting with my in-laws due to our incompatible personalities, my husband has recently become more biased towards his parents, hardly ever taking my side. The kind Steve I knew is gone, replaced by a puppet controlled by his parents. What was supposed to be an exciting new chapter in our lives with the construction of our new home has become a torment of meetings and hellish conversations with my in-laws. Whenever I try to discuss this with my husband, he resorts to threatening me with divorce. Once, whether as a joke or seriously, he even presented a filled-out divorce form, saying, "Your attitude towards my parents is too harsh. They're just trying to help, and they take good care of our son, don't they? If you keep this up, I'll seriously consider divorce." I was stunned. It became clear to me that he would always side with his parents. He claims his parents take good care of our son, but that's only during meetings. In reality, my parents are the ones who look after our son, responding to sudden calls from daycare, taking care of him when I'm sick, and even preparing gifts for his birthday and Christmas. My in-laws have never given him anything. Instead, they always ask for gifts when we visit. He doesn't understand anything. After much thought, I visited my parents. They could tell something was wrong, and my mother immediately asked, "What happened?" I decided to confide in her about everything. She told me, "You can always come back here if you need to." Hearing this gave me relief. I realized I don't need to cling to that family. It's just a matter of making a decision. But I have a son, and we're in the middle of building a house. However, given the situation, it seems only a matter of time before my in-laws take over the new house. Would I have to endure their verbal abuse and be used by them forever? I couldn't stand it. But if I proposed divorce now, my husband would likely reject it, despite his frequent threats of divorce. Their concern for appearances means a smooth separation is unlikely. That's when I came up with a plan and began preparing for the worst-case scenario. Finally, the new house was completed, and today my husband, my son, and I came for a visit. My son was thrilled, running around saying, "Yay! A new house." The new home smelled fresh, and it felt like I finally had the house of my dreams. We briefly discussed the move. The second floor was planned to have a guest room and my son's room, which we didn't plan to use for a while, so I thought of them as storage spaces for now. I mentioned this to my husband, but he only said, "Make sure to organize the stuff properly." Really? "There's no rush," I replied, though I was already feeling distrustful of him. On the day of the move, we proceeded as planned, unpacking our things. Expecting a busy day, we had our son stay with my parents. But then, I realized my husband was nowhere to be found. Searching for him, I found him on the phone, saying things like, "Oh, you're coming already? We haven't finished unpacking." Hearing this, I thought, the in-laws are coming again. But soon after, I saw another moving truck stop in front of our house from the window. I was wondering if perhaps we had forgotten to unload something when suddenly the doorbell rang. When I checked the intercom, my in-laws were there, carrying their luggage with them. "Hey, is everything unpacked yet?" they barged in, saying. "Oh. It's not organized at all yet, is it? I guess Kelly alone can't handle it." Behind them, a mover was holding protective covers commonly used during moving, saying, "Hello, may I start working now?" Work? What work? I was confused, but my in-laws told the workers to start, and suddenly, they began bringing things into our house. Hey, what is this? What's going on? When I confronted my husband, he coolly answered, they're moving in with us from today. It makes things easier for us since they've been helping with our son, right? What? I was never consulted about this. Well, I own the house, and my parents have been advising us about it, haven't they? And my mom said she wanted to live in this house too, he said nonchalantly. What? What are you talking about? This is supposed to be our family of three's home. There's no room for your parents. I said, only for my father-in-law to reply. What are you saying? The largest room on the second floor will be mine. And the smaller room next to it will be mine, my mother-in-law added. They even mentioned, we measured the other day, do you think the curtains will fit? What? Measured? When did that happen? I turned to my husband. Hey, have your parents been here before? What? Of course. They came the day before we had the viewing. What? Why? They wanted to see it, so I gave them the keys to check it out first. Can you believe it? My in-laws had seen the house before we had. Even deciding on their rooms and measuring for curtains. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. Why wouldn't you consult me? This is supposed to be our home for the three of us, right? And now there's no room for our son. What? We're not going to use our son's room right away. And the guest room is for when people visit, right? So it's fine if my parents use it. Didn't I tell you? The new house is for the family to live in. And family includes my parents, obviously. Are you tricking me? You're just misunderstanding. I'm the owner, so stop complaining. As we were arguing, my in-laws joined in. What's with this daughter-in-law? Opposing us living here? Too arrogant for a mere wife. Such an unfortunate daughter. It's natural for children to take care of their parents, isn't it? You joined our family, so you should take care of us too. That's a different issue. This house was built for us three to live in. Even the kitchen was designed with me using it in mind. That's fine, isn't it? After all, Kelly will be the one doing the housework in this house, right? It's natural for a wife to take care of the house, isn't it? So, you're saying you won't do any housework at all? Of course. What a noisy wife, Steve. If she's going to be like this, just divorce her. Finally, my father-in-law shouted. Steve also said, don't talk back to my parents. I'll really divorce you. Yes, that threat was finally made. So, you do want to divorce, don't you? Huh? I couldn't help but burst into laughter at the absurdity of the situation. I turned to my husband and said, we might as well be divorced already, right? My husband and in-laws looked shocked, their faces a picture of surprise. Technically, it's not official yet since it hasn't been submitted. Just on paper, really. I then presented the divorce papers right in front of my husband's eyes. Huh? It was the divorce form we had filled out some time ago. What's this? Oh? Forgotten already? You've been threatening me with divorce. Saying I'll divorce you and shoved these papers in my face, haven't you? I just went ahead and signed them too. What are you talking about? That was a joke. You think threatening me with divorce every day was a joke? We're married, aren't we? A little joke like that should be fine. Jokes are supposed to be funny. There's nothing funny about threats like that. Plus, I've recorded all our conversations and threats. What? I said, I'm taking these recordings to a lawyer and will proceed with the divorce. What about the house? I wanted to live here with you and our son. But it seems you didn't want that. Why don't you three live here? Oh, and since we're divorcing, I'll need the $50,000 I lent for the down payment back immediately. And I'll be taking a lump sum for child support. I'll be raising our son. Saying that, I opened a cardboard box. Inside were a duffel bag and a backpack, packed with the essentials for my son and me. Yes, I had been preparing for this moment. It turns out my in-laws were planning to take over the house. And my husband had colluded with them to deceive me. That leaves me with no choice but to divorce him. However, given his family's penchant for appearances, my husband won't agree to a divorce easily. That's when I remembered the divorce papers he had prepared as a threat. He never intended to follow through, but since he had filled them out so considerately, I decided to go along with it. But submitting them without confirming his intent to divorce could lead to the divorce being invalidated. So I made sure to record everything to confirm his intention. He probably thought I'd never have the courage to divorce him. Certainly, divorcing with a young son is no small feat, but I'm not alone. My parents are on my side, and living with that family would have been detrimental to my son. Therefore, separating is the best option. I took my belongings and went to my parents' house to explain the situation. They supported me, even saying, "You can stay here if you need to." Leaving my son with my parents, I visited a lawyer's office. I presented the divorce papers, explained my situation, and showed them the recordings, asking to proceed with the divorce. A week after leaving the new house, my husband called repeatedly. I didn't want to talk, so I didn't answer, but he left many messages on the answering machine. All about the mortgage, and, "What are you thinking, come back," were the gist of them, with no apologies or concern for our son. Nor any mention of evicting his parents. He wasn't concerned about anything but the mortgage, understandably so since he has no savings. He's always spent too much on hobbies like casinos and slots, despite planning to save before building the house. The only money available was the $50,000 from my savings before marriage. He'd casually said, "Sorry, but if the loan is in my name, it'll be fine," which I couldn't stand. So I had him sign a loan agreement acknowledging he borrowed $50,000 from me to be repaid in full. He probably thought it was a trivial matter between spouses and signed without fuss. But this document proved invaluable in an unexpected situation. When we decided to take out a mortgage, I used my savings for the down payment, and the mortgage was in Steve's name. However, it seemed he was counting on my income as well. Probably, he intended to put the burden of living expenses on me after inviting his parents to live with us. I'm sure his frugal parents wouldn't contribute a penny towards the living expenses. But since I'm getting a divorce, I no longer care about the affairs of that house. As long as I get back the money I lent and the child support, that's all that matters to me. I had no intention of speaking to that family again, so I asked a lawyer to handle everything. I showed them the promissory note Steve had signed, fully intending to collect. I was braced for his request to pay the child support in installments. However, his prideful parents said, "We want to cut ties with that demon wife as soon as possible," and opted to pay in one lump sum. How were they going to manage without savings? They probably borrowed from some dubious sources at a high interest rate. But that's none of my concern. I later learned that Steve's family decided not to live in the new single-family home and put it up for sale. Without me, continuing the mortgage payments must have become difficult. Not to mention the shady loans they had to repay. In the end, Steve and his parents had to rent a small apartment. His mother must have been disappointed about not being able to use the system kitchen, especially since it was designed for my height, which wouldn't have suited her short stature. Furthermore, Steve's divorced sister and her two sons A middle schooler and an elementary schooler also moved back in with them. That meant 6 people were living in a cramped space, relying on Steve's earnings and his parents' pensions for living expenses. With Steve chased by repayments, they had no financial leeway. I heard that with the increased family size, constant quarrels erupted in Steve's household, loud enough to draw complaints from neighbors. His sister raged, "I came back thinking we'd live in the new house, what's this all about?" While his mother constantly griped about wanting to use the system kitchen and live in the new house. Steve, driven to desperation, dove deeper into his gambling habits. His old hobby, incurring even more debt. Rumor has it he's gotten involved with even shadier lenders. Such a pitiful situation, but it's all Steve's own doing for siding solely with his parents. So it's his just desserts. As for me, I've moved into a rental apartment close to work with my son, living comfortably. My parents help out when I work late, giving me peace of mind. After working hard, I got promoted, and my salary increased. I'm saving the extra money to take my son and parents to a high-class resort for some well-deserved relaxation. Unlike someone, I'm living happily, showing gratitude to my supportive parents.